I. The moment I entered the room, I felt his eyes on me. My stepson was on the phone, his voice casual as he leaned against the wall, but I could sense the shift in the air. It was a quiet evening, one of those rare moments when the house was still, save for the distant hum of his voice. I reached up to tie my hair, an absent-minded gesture, and caught the slight hesitation in his words. He stumbled, just for a second, but it was enough to make me pause. I turned slightly, catching his reflection in the mirror. His gaze lingered on me, his expression unreadable. A mix of curiosity and something else, something I couldn't quite name. My heart raced, an involuntary reaction that I quickly pushed aside. This was ridiculous, I told myself. He was just distracted. Nothing more. Still, the way his voice softened, the way his eyes followed me, it was hard to ignore. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the memory of that moment. It replayed in my mind, a loop I couldn't escape. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every glance, searching for clues that might explain the tension I felt. He, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease. His behavior unchanged. It was maddening, how unaffected he seemed while I wrestled with my thoughts. One evening, as I prepared dinner, he walked into the kitchen. "Need any help?" he asked, his tone light. I shook my head, focusing on the chopping board in front of me. "I've got it," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He leaned against the counter, his presence filling the small space. "You've been quiet lately," he remarked, his eyes on me. I glanced up, forcing a smile. "Just busy," I said, hoping he couldn't hear the tremor in my voice. His gaze lingered, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more, but he didn't. Instead, he nodded and left the room, leaving me alone with my racing heart. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the conversation, dissecting every word, every nuance. Was I imagining things? Or was there something unspoken between us? The days turned into weeks, and the tension only grew. It was subtle, like an undercurrent. Always present, but never overt. I caught him watching me more often, his gaze steady and unwavering. And when our eyes met, it was as though the world fell away, leaving just the two of us in a bubble of charged silence. I hated how it made me feel. Confused, vulnerable, exposed. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when he walked in. He hesitated, his eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. I looked up, startled. "About what?" I replied, though I had a feeling I already knew. He sat down across from me, his posture relaxed but his expression serious. "I don't want things to be weird between us," he began, his eyes searching mine. "If I've done something to make you uncomfortable, I'm sorry." His words caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "You haven't," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's not you, it's me." He frowned, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" he asked. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "I've just been in my head a lot lately," I admitted. "Overthinking things." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "If there's ever anything you want to talk about," he said, his tone gentle, "I'm here." His kindness only made it harder. I nodded, offering a weak smile. "Thanks," I said, hoping he couldn't see the turmoil in my eyes. As the days went on, I tried to put distance between us, hoping the space would help me sort out my feelings. But it only made things worse. The more I avoided him, the more I found myself thinking about him. It was a vicious cycle, one I couldn't seem to break. And then, one evening, everything came to a head. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when he walked in. "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. "This," he said, gesturing between us. "Whatever's been going on." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. "There's nothing going on," I said quickly, my voice defensive. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "You can't even look me in the eye," he pointed out. "That says otherwise." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. "I don't know what you want me to say," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "The truth," he said simply. "Whatever it is, I can handle it." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "I've been confused," I admitted. "About us. About this." His expression softened, and he took a step closer. "You're not alone," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I've felt it too." His admission left me reeling. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling. He shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know we can't ignore it anymore." The weight of his words settled over me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to acknowledge the truth. There was something between us, something neither of us could deny. In the weeks that followed, we navigated the uncharted waters of our new reality. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments of fear, but there were also moments of clarity and connection. We talked more openly, sharing our thoughts and feelings in a way we never had before. And though the path ahead was uncertain, we faced it together, one step at a time. As time went on, I couldn't help but notice how our connection deepened in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every conversation felt more meaningful, every shared glance more charged. It was as if we were building a bridge between two islands, cautiously but deliberately. We began to share more personal moments, stories from the past, dreams for the future. Each revelation felt like peeling back another layer, exposing truths we had kept hidden even from ourselves. One day, as we sat in the garden, he told me about his struggles, moments of self-doubt and feeling out of place. His vulnerability took me by surprise, and it stirred something within me. A protective instinct I hadn't realized I possessed. I reached out, placing a hand on his, a simple gesture that seemed to convey more than words ever could. "You're not alone," I said softly, echoing the words he had once told me. His gaze met mine, and for a moment, the world around us seemed to fade away. But even as we grew closer, the fear of discovery loomed over us like a shadow. Every interaction carried the weight of what could happen if someone else noticed, if our unspoken connection became too obvious. It was a precarious balance, a tightrope walk that left us both exhilarated and terrified. And yet, neither of us could bring ourselves to step back. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Do you ever think about where this is going?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The question caught me off guard, and I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "All the time," I admitted finally, my voice barely above a whisper. His expression softened, and he reached for my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We'll figure it out," he said, his tone filled with quiet determination. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that we might. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, moments of joy, fear, longing, and doubt. We learned to navigate the complexities of our relationship, finding solace in the small, stolen moments we shared. And though the road ahead was uncertain, we faced it together, determined to find our way through the storm. What we had wasn't conventional, nor was it easy, but it was real, and it was ours. And in a world full of uncertainty, that was enough.